this episode being the fourth entry of the Lion episodes, my original thoughts is that this episode would have ended up being better than the other Lion episodes, but at the same time, that's just me not remembering a lot about the episode itself in comparison to the other Lion episodes. Lion pukes out a huge key that, while Steven is doing some researching about the tape itself from his mother, it gave him an idea of what the key is for, and he goes to different locations to use it, but unfortunately, every single one of those locations were unsuccessful. That isn't until Lion takes Steven to the desert to where Rose's landfill is located, and once he uses the key, it's revealed to be most of the stuff that Rose have left behind and keep hidden from anyone else up until someone finds the key, which Steven did. This leads to Steven finding a tape called Noah on it, so Lion takes Steven to Greg, who they watched the tape together, and it's been revealed that the tape is literally the same thing. The only difference is that Rose told the camera Noah instead of Steven, implying that if she turned into a daughter rather than a son, she would have called her Noah instead of Steven. I really expected this episode to be a lot more in comparison to the other Lion episodes, because since that, when this episode came out, it was after 2 years since the third Lion episode, and for me personally, I was expecting this episode to be a lot more better, because after watching Storm in the Room, it really feels like that the character that Steven had experience with when it comes to Rose's past and all that, it really feels like that this episode was mainly an excuse to showcase of what the alternative would have been like if Steven was a girl, which leads to her being called Noah, and the show would have been called Noah Universe. Though, to give this episode credit, I'll admit that this was bound to happen for a mother or father having two separate tapes of making the same thing, just with one minor change of the Steven tape being called Steven, while the other is being called Noah. And to tell you the truth, judging of how that Steven went through so much just to figure out the solution on the key that he had, which leads to him being in a position while he wants more answers than being left in the dark. This series is reaching to the point of no return when it comes to Steven unlocking the truth. And trust me, judging of how that Paul is really becoming more stressed out by keeping her dark secret from anyone, this episode really indicated that the more we see Steven learn about more of this stuff, the more he realizes that something isn't right. And while in this scenario, it's not really that much of a big deal, considering that if he was a girl, he would have been called Noah instead. I may have debated in the past that if Rose didn't turn into Steven, we would have had a different direction with so many changes along the way, but I think that the biggest reason onto why that this direction sums up a lot about Steven's character is the fact that he had to do literally everything to make everyone happy, all the while trying to make himself happy, which kind of sums up onto why he's always happy 24/7, but for me personally, with him mostly taking the situation seriously, centering around information from his mother, his judgment becomes a lot more stronger. Every time I think about this episode, I wish it would have been better. Even in some aspects, it does make sense for the way it is right now upon revisiting it. But for me personally, this episode was something that I was thinking of considering it was the fourth Lion episode that happened 2 years after the third. And every time that this episode becomes a lot more complex before watching it for the first time, I really felt like that there could have been something interesting like Storm in the Room. But apparently, this is just mainly an excuse to see what the alternative would have looked like if Steven was a god and called Noah. I'm just saying that this episode really feels a little lackluster for my take, considering that it could have been somewhat better if it had a different direction. But at the same time, considering that they'll probably wanted to make another Lion episode, this is really the best of what they can do. And considering that the third Lion episode is still a season 1 episode, I'm really getting the impression that they really wanted to make another Lion episode after so many seasons, with season 1 happening way earlier in production before it aired in 2015. Then again, people have been making debates on what's inside the treasure chest that is inside Lion's Mane, and as much as it's really important information that people really need to check out, I'm getting the impression that the people have to scrap this idea due to how rushed the last season was. Obviously, it may not be the case, but at the same time, there are so many missed opportunities that it's becoming a little overwhelming for me to handle. For this episode, I don't hate it, but at the same time, I really wanted it to be a lot more better, but that's just me expecting a lot more, considering that I literally forgot about this episode as much as the other episodes. Hopefully the final 3 episodes from this season will make me a lot more occupied, judging of how the characters are going to be having different directions, and leading to the events of the season 5 premiere. I'm giving this episode a 7 out of 10.